Welcome to the Story Fulfilled podcast, where we deep dive into how each character and story in the Bible comes together to fulfill the story of God.
I'm Abby.
I'm Jay.
I'm Fletcher.
And hey, I'm Steve.
And today's story is about all the people who helped rebuild the wall for the Second Temple.
Hold up.
That didn't sound... There's an extra person in there.
Are you guys
Steve
sure?
who?
Who's Steve?
Who's Steve?
We have
Who
a
is
very
Steve?
we have a special guest today in the studio recording with us,
Yeah.
Mr. Steve Bradley.
Thanks for having me, guys. This is really nice in here. I had no idea this upper room existed in this church.
Oh, really?
So I've been around a bit, and I'm like, I feel like I'm in a whole new world. It's very cool. Yeah.
There you go.
Well,
very
we love
nice.
to have you here. It's nice.
So for our listeners who don't know or don't recognize that, because you have a recognizable voice, and there's a reason why you have a recognizable voice, who are you and why are you here?
My name is Steve. Jay invited me here.
You have a dog?
I have a dog named Wally
Makes it onto
and a
the
wife.
Instagram often.
Yes, he does. He was just running around. We were chasing him out to the park. That's why I was late. But yeah, I work at Life 100.3. I do the morning show. I've been there 5 years now. And before that, I was a pastor for 11 years, youth pastor. And that is my story. That is the radio version of the story.
There you go.
Yeah.
I like asking every time I do this. I'm like, who are you and why are you here? Why are you on our show? And everybody's like, oh, why are you asking me like that? You can at least ask nicer. But
Because of Jay.
So interrogating.
that was Pastor Jen's answer as well. Well, they asked me to be on here.
Yeah.
I'm your friend.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
Nice. Well, welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
we're glad
Abby.
to have you.
Thank you. We were at a concert together.
We were.
Yeah, and I thought I recognized you, but I wasn't
They
sure.
sat side by side.
We
and
did,
they
and I'm
didn't
staring at him. I'm like, I know this guy. I know this guy.
And Fletcher's like, I know this guy, but I don't want to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I walked in here, and I'm like, I know this guy.
No longer starstruck?
Yeah, no,
You've
it's
met-
all good. We had to clean up the whole studio. It was
They
looking a
say-
little
Oh my
messy.
goodness.
They say you should never meet your heroes. Are you okay?
I'll be fine.
Okay.
I'll be
There you
okay.
go. Here you go.
That guy.
Yeah, Fletcher was like very nervous. We were driving and he's like, I'm going to have to go clean up the studio because it's like a mess up there and we can't let Steve see that.
And I was writing the script, and I'm like, oh, we got to make the script good this week. And Abby's like, well, you had the bishop and the pastor of your
That's
church
right.
on as a guest. I'm like, no, it doesn't matter. I know them. I don't know Steve.
Yeah, he's like, the bishop's my uncle, and
What is he gonna
the
do?
pastor
Yeah.
used to be my youth pastor, so
It's fine.
We
But
should bring
this
you
is
into.
Steve.
We should bring you in for a tour at Life 100.
Oh, boy.
Take you in
Oh,
the
Fletcher's
studio
gonna
there.
get all
That'd be a
starstruck.
ton of fun.
that'd be fun. Let's do a story fulfilled podcast outing to Life 100.
Yeah, there we go.
There
You
you
guys
go.
would like it. It's a lot of fun in there.
Yeah.
Fun.
And we're allowed to have guests now. So
Wow,
Nice.
there we go.
Yeah,
Very
we've been
good.
on lockdown forever, so it's nice to get out of that.
Oh, yeah,
Fun.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay, so we got a question because we're dealing with the builders in Nehemiah, and Abby said that they kind of resemble like the end credits in a film. And so and we'll get into kind of why that is as we talk in the episode here. But the question then is, if you could have any job on a movie set that shows up in the end credits of a film, what job would you want to have?
Abby, you look like you really want to go first.
Yeah.
I want to be key grip number 3.
Number 3.
Yeah.
And could you give us a little explanation of what that is?
I cannot.
Okay. She saw it one time. She's like, that's my dream right there. Key grip number 3.
They get paid between $15 and $25 an hour.
There you
Okay.
go. You know,
Yeah.
okay.
Big
But
goals.
High aspirations, yeah.
is there a reason why you don't want to be key
No.
grip number 1 or 2?
Well, there's less pressure if you're number 3.
Okay, there you go. But I'm assuming that if things fall off, like things that grip 1 misses and key grip 2 misses, and then it gets to key grip 3, if you miss it, then it's like you
Come
really
on.
missed it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this got missed 3 times, guys.
I'm thinking that's a really good interview question because I feel like I just learned a lot about you right
Who
there
Abby wants to
with
be.
that choice and answer.
Yeah.
I
right.
wouldn't actually want to be key grip number 3.
Okay,
I just
okay.
think it's a good answer. Yeah, I don't
Okay,
know what
fair
I
enough.
want to do. Okay,
All right.
someone
You
else
know,
go
next-
first.
All right. So I think for me, so I'm gonna be honest. When I saw that this was the question, I pulled up I googled what
That's
are the
good.
jobs, right?
Smart.
And I landed on the boom operator. Because as soon as I saw the name boom operator, I had POD in my head. It's like, boom, here comes the boom, here comes the boom. Boys from the South.
Is POD the artist that
POD,
sings that?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
because I just recognize it from the movie Here Comes the Boom, if I'm honest.
Okay.
You don't know the song here?
I know the boom. I mean,
He
I
knows
know
the
the boom. I know
you
the
don't
song.
know it from the album.
I don't
you know it from the movie
right,
that it was in.
That's
Okay.
right, with Kevin James.
It was in that movie?
Yeah, it's named after it, I think.
Really?
So
Yeah.
I'm like,
Makes
I want to be the
sense.
boom operator, and every time I have to do my job, I'm singing that song.
Yeah.
Just pumping myself
Right into
up.
your own microphone, too.
Yeah, yeah.
It's always the boom operator who gets in trouble. Boom mic! Boom!
Yeah.
Get the boom mic out of the shot!
Yeah, or accidentally knocking something over.
Yeah, that's
or
right.
Yeah.
accidentally tickling
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah,
where they
with the little
don't want-
feathery, yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
All right, Steve, what do you think?
All right.
I would want to be in costumes or makeup.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't do
Wearing
very
them
good-
or like dressing other people?
I just want to be in the room.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
super cool.
So you
I
can
don't
be
know,
like
like,
the
I could be the
coffee boy.
assistant. I
The
could be the
coffee
coffee
boy
boy.
for the costume
Yes.
person.
Okay. There you
Because
go.
it would be the coolest room to be in. You
That's
see all
fair.
the heads they make and
That's
true.
you know the
Especially with a lot of special effects. If it was like just a romance movie, it wouldn't be very much.
Yeah,
but
that would be terrible. Put me in a
Sci-fi
sci-fi
movie.
with
Yeah.
Klingons.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with special thanks to at the very end. It's like you get English and then you get the French version and the Russian version and at the bottom special thanks to Fletcher.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
That's it. I didn't do anything. Just I was around and they're gonna thank me.
That's awesome. I like
That's
that
amazing. Yeah, like what did the special thanks to
don't
people
know.
actually do? What
one.
like
They inspired the story.
Yeah.
Or it's like the aunt of the director or something.
Right.
She inspired me to write. Yeah.
special
Donated
thanks
I
to-
$3.
Yeah.
Fletcher gave someone the pep talk that made them become a director.
Yeah.
And
There
that
we go.
was that.
I hope one day I can achieve that. Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
good.
Higher
right.
never mind. We'll just keep going.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
as always, we encourage you to read the story for yourself, that get the whole story of what's going on. And today's story takes place in the book of Nehemiah.
Nehemiah.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's happening same time frame as last week. So and the reason for that is actually Ezra and Nehemiah it's actually just one whole story. And some Old Testaments actually combine the two books.
Well, like in the Hebrew,
In the
Hebrew I think
scriptures,
it's one book. Yeah.
Yep. And so it's all just the same story. The other thing about that is that there's other stories that are happening at the same time. And I don't think we jumped into this last week, but at the same time, we have Haggai, Zechariah, we have Esther, and we have Malachi, and then we have a whole bunch of Psalms that are being written at the same time as well. And so that helps to kind of put things into perspective too. Like if you know what's happening during the time of a minor prophet when you're reading it, then it gives you a little bit more insight into what they're talking about and what the contemporary issues of the time are.
Especially since we haven't said this enough this season, but the Bible's not in chronological order.
This is true.
We said it last season.
Yeah.
But this
Unless
season,
you get a
Unless you buy it,
chronological
yes.
order Bible.
You can get one, but the standard issue Bible is not in chronological order. So Ezra, Nehemiah, like we said, contemporary with a bunch of minor prophets and
Yeah.
Esther.
So this is after the 70-year exile, which we talked about, which is prophesied in the book of Jeremiah. King Cyrus of Persia sent the Jews back to Judea to build the temple, and that was Ezra. And the story takes place during the reign of King Artaxerxes.
Artaxerxes.
You
Yeah.
did very well with that name.
That's something we struggle with every time. Our names,
Just you.
pronunciation,
Yeah,
just
you
me.
guys
If you can read it as confidently as you can, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong.
Fair
just
enough.
do it with confidence.
Fletcher's brother Braden has this great quote. He is 75% right 75% of the time. You just gotta speak it
There
confidently.
you go.
Just go for it.
I like that.
So anyway, time frame wise, we're in the 29th year of King Artaxerxes' reign. See,
good
look
job.
at that,
Yeah, there
first
you go.
try. It's about 445 BC. Persia basically controls the entire world from Turkey to India, and the Greeks are the other superpower at the time. They're the ones that are fighting the Persians. And if you've heard of the Greco-Persian Wars, they're very famous. Greece is fighting against Persia. If you've seen the movie 300, good movie,
We're not
wouldn't recommend
promoting
it. If
yeah.
you could find a clean version, maybe. It's It's hard to clean it up.
What is it? There is the Pureflix. I think
There you go.
They pull everything out.
Okay.
Of there might not be much
no
left
movie
of the
left.
movie,
It'd be
but
15 minutes of them marching. No,
Yeah.
but it takes place. Sparta is fighting the Persians. Anyway, and the story actually that we're talking about today takes place in Jerusalem, but the city's completely destroyed.
Right. And so the other cool thing about that, at least something to make note of, happening at 445 BC, these are roughly the last events recorded in the Old Testament. Like we know that there's a 400-year period where there's nothing recorded in
In the
Hebrew
Bible, yeah.
scriptures, and so yeah, these are like the last events in the Old Testament.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. So, the same location as last week. We're in Jerusalem, still rebuilding the wall. Today's story, they're specifically rebuilding the Sheep Gate, which is actually best known today as the Lion's Gate, and it's actually located in the Muslim quarter of Jerusalem's Old City. The Sheep Gate was where the sheep that were being led for sacrifice were brought into the temple. And what's kind of cool is that there's actually some New Testament significance to this location. This is where Stephen in Acts 7 recounted the story of God through the Old Testament to the Jewish leaders, and then he was stoned. So this is also now called the Gate of St. Stephen, which I thought was pretty neat. They're also rebuilding the Ancient Gate, aka the Golden Gate.
I thought that was in. Sorry, is that in San Francisco?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
the
why.
bridge. The
That's
same
why
one.
there's
It's
an
the bridge that you take to
AKA.
get there.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
But this gate is also the one that Jesus later walked through on his way to Jerusalem when he was doing his triumphant entry. And there were other gates that were around and that they were building, but I thought these ones were kind of cool because they have the most New Testament significance. So if you want to read more about like the specific gates that these guys were building today, read Nehemiah 3, and then you can look them up as you go.
You didn't even mention my favorite gate, the Dung Gate.
There is
I
a
wonder
Dung
what
Gate.
they did out the Dung Gate.
You know, I saw that one. I'm like,
Fletcher will mention
Fletcher
it.
will mention it.
And I have a feeling that if Fletcher didn't mention it, Steve might.
Yeah,
have.
somebody was going to bring up the Dung Gate.
Yeah, there you go. So that's our geography for today.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's start the story up. And I just wanted to have a little note before I started telling the story. We're going to have a little link to an article in the show notes, but it's basically talking about the names of kings in the Persian Empire at the time. We've talked about Cyrus, we've talked about Darius, Artaxerxes, Xerxes, and it gets really confusing as to who's who and when they ruled. So if you want to look at this article, it's fantastic. It talks about how these names weren't actually proper names, but titles of kings.
Right.
So it's going to sound confusing. You're going to hear Artaxerxes, Xerxes, Darius, blah, blah, blah. Their titles and the reigns of history, like it all lines up with history, but it's
Right.
really hard to speak in a story.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I just want to say before I go into it.
Yeah,
And
so I will put that article in the show notes if anybody wants to read it.
Yeah, I would suggest reading it because it's actually pretty important because that's one of the things that people use to refute the authenticity or
Historicity.
historicity.
Look at that. I got
There
it
we
that
go.
time.
Historicity of the Bible, right? People will say, well, the book of Esther talks about King Xerxes, and he's actually never mentioned in the Persian record keeping that or whatever. Like, people look at some of these differences in names and use that as so-called proof against the Bible. So this article helps to put that into perspective and gives you a better understanding. If somebody challenges you for believing the Bible with that as an example, this gives you a better understanding of why that is.
Well, I just thought of something that was in the article at the same time here. When you look at like modern history, we study the Greek histories, and that's
Right.
where we're getting our translations from, is from the Greek. So they were translated from Persian to Greek to English, and then in the Bible we're getting it from Persian to Hebrew to English, and all these names are getting mixed up and lost, and
Yeah.
it gets confusing, man. I mean, it's a great article, but even I was confused at it. But anyway, let's start the story. So last week we talked about the temple construction and the building of the altar with Ezra and Zerubbabel and Jeshua. But now we're going to move forward a couple years, and we're going to a man named Nehemiah, and he was actually the cupbearer to the king Artaxerxes. And he's a Jewish man, but he's saddened about the state of the city of his ancestors. He's sad about the destruction of Jerusalem.
Right.
And, with prayer, and he's thinking about it, and he ends up telling the king what's wrong. And he's a very brave thing to do, right? He's not going to go up and say, I want to go do this, but he's all sad, and the king notices him sad and asks him what's wrong.
Which was dangerous.
Yeah, and well, if you read the book of Esther, you see the same thing. Like, you don't just...
Yeah.
And it must have shown that the king cared for him. If
Yeah,
the king
it's
actually
true.
looked back at
Yeah.
him and said, what's wrong?
Right.
Right?
Noticed it,
And
yeah.
so they must have had a good relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, that
and
really highlights
points
that
to the
for sure.
character of Nehemiah as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yep.
So Nehemiah is asked by the king what's wrong, and Nehemiah asks the king to let him go rebuild the city. And he also asked for letters from the governors of the region to let him pass through peacefully, and letter to the manager of the forest to let him use wood.
Wait, was it really the manager of the
Yeah.
forest?
Manager
That's
of
actually
the
what-
manager of the
That is a
forest.
title.
Yeah.
like
There's a
that's-
degree.
Is that what you would want in the?
No, I
And
don't.
it's
I
different
don't.
than
No, I
special
like
thanks.
mountains.
Okay.
Yeah, but
So
like
the
our
manager-
cousin Alex can be the manager of the forest.
Sure.
He
There we go.
likes
Perfect.
forests.
He
There
likes
we go.
forests. So yeah, he basically just needs wood to rebuild the walls.
Right.
And somehow the king agrees. This is what shocks me, and sends Nehemiah to go rebuild the wall with a bunch of Hebrews, which is crazy. So why does he let him go? That's what I don't know.
Other than the God factor, I think
Yeah.
it's his relationship with him.
Yeah. That's actually it. There's this phrase. It shows up a couple of times in Nehemiah. Because the hand of the Lord my God was upon me. Boom. Boom. See, there's the boom. That's why I'm the boom operator. But that's it, right? It's not, and we often make Nehemiah all about like, this is the leadership book, and Nehemiah is a great leader, and these are the 7 qualities of a godly leader, blah, 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 blah. Because the hand of the Lord my God was upon me, that's actually the answer to leadership, and the answer to why the king let him go, which is incredible, right? And there's also this moment where it says, and then I prayed, and then he says what he says. But we don't hear the prayer. There is no, and it's almost like just this constant state of prayer that Nehemiah is in, which I think is so cool. So because the hand of the Lord my God was upon me.
I love that he's seen the need.
Yeah.
Like all of us can relate to. We all see needs around us, right? But he did something with that need. He just didn't keep it to himself. Like he went to the person that could do something about that because he had a relationship with them.
Right.
And so he said, there's a need here. My people, can we do something? And I love how God provided all that for him. And so when God put, it's almost when God puts something on you, because the hand of God is on him, he's obviously put this burden on him. He did something with it. He went and talked to the right people, and then God provided Nehemiah
with the
as
rest.
we're going to find out. Like
Yeah.
it's very cool. It's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
So go ahead.
So, well, just that's another, like, pay attention to those things that burden your heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're going to actually get into today's story, and it's not a long one because that's just the intro to the story. But where today's story starts is Nehemiah Chapter 3, and it just starts listing the names of the families and the groups and the leaders of the people who actually went to Jerusalem to rebuild. They came from all over Israel. They came from Persia itself to come rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And every section of the wall has specific people who built it. It's like, oh, and this is where this guy lives, so he built it near this gate, or this is where they built this gate. And it names the priests, it names the families, the groups, everybody. It even mentions a name you might recognize from the book of Esther named Mordecai.
Yeah.
And it's probable that he gave Nehemiah his title of Lord of the region or the governor of the region, because Mordecai was in charge of Persia at one point, and we think that if he was a Hebrew, he'd be like, okay, we can give you a governorship, which would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
So while they're building, at one point, some enemies of Nehemiah named Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, they want to put a stop to the construction of the building.
The worst.
I know. Awful.
We're gonna talk about them in a later
I think we have an
season.
episode specifically about those guys.
Good.
A
I
bunch
got
of
some
jerks.
things to say.
Yeah.
So get excited
You
about
don't have
that.
time to talk about what they did. Yeah. Anyway, so Nehemiah ends up setting up guards on every corner of the city. He even gives every builder a weapon to protect themselves with. So these guys have a sword on their side, and they're hauling logs.
Hammer in one hand,
exactly,
sword in the other.
to protect themselves because they were under attack while building, yet they completed it. And even with that interruption and that threat of battle, they ended up finishing the entire Jerusalem wall in 52 days.
52
That's
days.
crazy.
I'm trying to think of like a modern construction project. You're trying to like build a house and it takes 3 years. Yeah.
Just go downtown Barrie. Those have been like 15 years.
There's one pothole there. It's been there. Yeah. In 52 days, they built the entire wall.
My gosh.
Something I love about what you said there was them having a sword on their side and still doing the work. And how many times do we feel like we're under attack, or
Right.
we're going through stuff, but they didn't stop the work when they were being persecuted. And so many times we're like, I got to take a break from ministry. They didn't have the time to take a break.
Yeah.
They
had a job to
I want
do.
to say we had to build it now.
Yeah.
Take them in there, but they had to keep going, even though they were going through stuff. And maybe you're going through stuff right now, and you got to keep going.
Absolutely.
My wife loves to point out that in that, like, there's this interaction that they have where they're trying to call Nehemiah away, and he basically says, I don't have time for your nonsense.
Yes, let's go.
Like, I got work to do. Go away.
Leadership principle number 4.
There we go.
Just tell people to go away.
Get back to
Yeah.
work. Yeah. Awesome.
Oh, man.
Nobody got time for that.
So I after reading the
Outside
story,
Let's go.
this whole episode is gonna be us giggling at Steve.
Memes.
Yeah. So my question is, why are all these people named? You can look at it, Nehemiah chapter 3, and it's like name after name after name after name, person. This is what they're doing. Why is it in there?
Yeah. Well, so I was sharing before, like, this is the book of Nehemiah is a book that I teach at Cape and Ray when I go to teach. And one of the things that I make a point to do is when I get to this chapter, I actually read through the whole chapter. Every single name, mispronunciations and all. When I taught it the last time at Cape and Ray Harbor, I got a round of applause when I was done, which was a little bit satisfying. But the reason that I do that is because God cared enough to have each of those names listed in the chapter. And if God cares enough about having each of those names listed, then that just says something about the importance of each person and the role that they played in what they did. The other really neat thing about it is there are priests, there are like people who have all kinds of different roles.
Yeah, no, it was artists, it was priests, it was farmers,
yeah.
it was shepherds, it was everybody. It wasn't just
Everybody.
like professional builders. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, like, nobody was too important for the work, and nobody was not
that's
important enough for the work.
That's
Like,
really good.
People just, they did the work that was set before them, which I
And that
loved.
fits in perfectly to our theme, like the helpers. It's nobody's not important enough, and nobody's too important to do the work that has been set forward for them.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool aspect.
Yeah.
And they're so specific with like where they helped. Like as I was reading through the locations, I was gonna go through each gate, and I'm like, oh no, this is gonna take way too long. But it's cool because they list like, okay, no, this person worked on this part of the project. This person was on this part,
Right.
and so it wasn't even just like that they're important. It's that this was their contribution. This was their area. This is where they like did their stuff, and I think that's pretty cool that
Yeah.
it was that specific too, right? All right, so I guess that leads us to our final question. So, how does this story of Nehemiah and the builders help to tell the story of God throughout the rest of the Bible?
Cool. I have a little bit of an answer that I'll start with, and then if you guys have anything to add afterward,
See what you got.
fantastic. So Nehemiah rebuilding the city of Jerusalem, it actually fulfills a prophecy that is given in the book of Daniel. Just like we saw Ezra fulfills a prophecy from Jeremiah, this one is in the book of Daniel, chapter 9, 24 and 25. And Daniel was told that when the city of Jerusalem is rebuilt, because it was destroyed, sorry, we should probably preface this. It was destroyed by the Babylonians.
Right.
When the city of Jerusalem is rebuilt, that in 7 and 62 weeks, the Messiah would come. And that's Jesus, as we know now. But
Right.
these 7 and 62 weeks, it's like a weird interpretation. It's like, that's not like that's not even a year.
Right.
It's a year and a bit. But the word for week in Hebrew is a little bit different, and it just means set of 7. So the way, I'm not going to do the math again. You're going to have to look it up. Just look up the prophecy in Daniel 9. But it actually works out to a certain amount of years, and it's about 490 years. And that count would start when Jerusalem was rebuilt. So
Right.
we see Nehemiah asking King Artaxerxes to rebuild the wall, and we can start a timer basically. And we go 490 years in the future, and that is exactly the same year that Jesus did his triumphal entry into Jerusalem. So I'm like, oh my goodness, that is so cool.
Yeah.
So like
very cool.
the amount of planning, it's like that's 500 years ago.
Yeah.
This is all set out, laid out
Yeah.
to the year.
Yeah.
And there's math to point to the day. I don't have time to show you the
Right.
math. Look it up, Daniel 9 prophecy. It's really cool how literally Nehemiah, who's never met Daniel. He's in a completely different part of the Persian Empire, set off a prophecy that was set years before his time.
Yeah, and then the 490, if you remember last week's episode, we talked about the 70 Sabbath years that were skipped that led to captivity, which was 490 years that the land was worked, and then God said, I'm going to give it the rest of the 70 years, making up for the Sabbath years that were missed. So we've talked with Bishop Cliff about these just the reoccurring themes and numbers and motifs that we see through Scripture. So numbers, again, very important to pay. It was his word.
Yeah.
That's a good word.
We couldn't come up with something like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to see if I can put that in the show tomorrow morning.
But we pay attention to numbers as we see them in Scripture and the significance that they have. So
yeah, and I find it's like you're reading the book of Daniel, and it's not really that close in the Bible itself, like between books.
Right.
And then you're like, wait a minute, okay, this is at the same time. You're not going to get that on a first reading. Like that's something you got to really dig deep for, and it's I find it so cool. I just blew my mind when I'm reading about it.
Yeah.
So I think that it has a prophecy built into the Messiah, to Jesus coming, and that's where this story kind of fits in.
Mm-hmm.
Also, obviously, the reconstruction of Jerusalem is pretty important.
Yeah.
You know what? When I look at this story and how it maybe applies to today and how anybody can apply it to their lives is when you see the burden, you answer the burden. God, when you have a vision, money always follows vision all the time. And so when God puts something lays something on your heart, he will provide. So as I was coming upstairs into this room that I've never seen before, and I'm like, oh, this is so awesome. This is so cool. Jay takes me back into the room, and he just starts sharing vision. And he's got this whole idea that I'm not going to share because it's Jay's vision and his idea, but I'm catching it. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is amazing. And right away, I can start to see money following it, because people catch that, and you'll see God start to provide that. And God provided every single thing that Nehemiah needed. And nobody else could take the credit for that but God. And so as you guys, as you're listening, you see a burden, you got vision, it may cost money, share it with somebody. Share what's on your heart. I think that's an important part of the story, that Nehemiah shared it. Right. And because of that, God was able to use that moment and be able to produce everything that was produced out of it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
It's a good word. That'll preach.
It's a good way to end.
I can keep going.
There we
Sure,
go.
no, it's okay. Well, thank you. No more. It's over. It's over.
No. We'll save some for you the next time we have
That's
you
right.
on.
He'll have to come back
There you
and
go.
keep going.
Yeah,
We'll
it
let him
has
go
been
longer.
great having you here.
I want to ask him a question for
Star
you.
power.
Do you have a radio voice that you put on, or is it just natural that you that's how you talk all the time?
Am I talking to you like I would on the radio?
Yeah.
Then that's Steve.
It's all Steve.
Very good.
Awesome.
It's all Steve.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We love having you. We hope to have you again sometime.
True
Thank
story.
you.
Yes. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Have a great week.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.